Time to chat federal politics, and the next few months are shaping very much as a battle centred around the economy. Joining me is former Minister in the Howard Government and Bondi Partner Senior Advisor Peter McGauran. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Tim.
Now, the year begins with similar challenges for the government of cost of living, and we've seen Anthony Albanese we spoke about this last week, but he's been very much on the front foot on social media, in the public appearances that he has made, and his chat's centred around how he is going to help.
Correct. He has spent the early days of the new year expressing a concern about the cost of living impact on families and small business and the like, but he has no solution. And in fact, he gave a rather strange press conference earlier this week in which he announced that the government would be addressing cost of living issues in the May budget. Well, I think that's too little too late. He has to have solutions from now on because his political fortunes are tied to a reduction on the impact of cost of living.
Is there a light at the end of the tunnel, do you think, around cost of living?
If there is a light, Tim, it's distant and dim and flickering. Australia's inflation rate's 5.4%. America's is 3.1%. Now, we'll have the December quarter inflation rate at the end of January. Look, even if it comes down to 5%, and it will come down, you only have to look at retail and petrol have come down, but wages have gone up. Now, that's the big thing that concerns the Reserve Bank. Even if it was to come down to 5%, Tim, or 4.9%, that's still nowhere near the target of 3%. We're still a long way. In fact, Australia is the highest inflation rate of the developed economies. And there's every likelihood that the Reserve Bank will increase interest rates at their first Tuesday in February meeting.
People don't want to hear that.
They don't want to hear it, but most economists believe there'll be an interest rate increase in February. So we've got a long way to putting the genie back in the bottle.
All right, well, we'll park that to one side. The PM and the opposition leader have done a few media commitments. We saw Anthony Albanese at the cricket yesterday, but they've lowered the tempo. We haven't seen much of them. Do you think that this is welcomed by voters?
Yes, it is. No one wants their new year interrupted by bellicose politicians. But on the other hand, if the situation demands it, such as bushfires, then the leaders need to be centre and supportive. Look, I really think both the Leader of the Opposition and the Prime Minister would be better advised just taking a break and coming forward when need be. I don't like this smattering. And obviously Prime Minister Albanese is very sensitive and their research must obviously be telling them this. He was half apologising for going to the McGauran Foundation Pink Breast Cancer Research Day when he said, look, and for Dave Warner's farewell, in which he said, I'll only be there a short while. So the pennies dropped with them that his absences last year has fed into an impression that he's either uncaring at worst or disconnected at best.
But in those instances, you don't and shouldn't be apologetic. When you think of them, look, you think of the McGauran Foundation, just take that. Yeah. It started with 4 breast care nurses 16 years ago. They've got 204 breast care nurses. Regional Australia covered 157,000 families have been affected. Yeah. We're talking the Sydney Test match, iconic moment. All eyeballs are there as well. Dave Warner, despite his odd drama, an iconic sportsman. So, like John Howard was there.
Yes. So why would you apologise? I think it just shows their sensitivity.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister and the government as a whole has had something of a tin.
And the point I'm making is that you've got to, you don't want to stop being able to read the room, do you?
Correct.
Now, not long until the Iowa caucuses, we've seen town halls from both Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. Donald Trump's maybe on his golf course. He's not doing it. What have you thought?
Look, he has surged. That's the big political story out of the United States last year and again this year. He surged against his Republican contenders and surged against Joe Biden. I don't think DeSantis has come across at all well. He seems very dull. Nikki Haley, I'd tone back on the criticism of Trump. Neither are going to beat Trump for the nomination of the Republican Party.
Unless he beats himself.
Correct. And that's what, if I was advising them, for what it's worth, that's what I'd be suggesting. Don't attack Trump. Establish your own credentials separately, which to Nikki Haley's credit, she's been doing that until now.
And you look at Hampshire, it's unbelievable.
He may never be the candidate on the ticket on the 5th of November next year because of all of his court trials. So just be ready and reserved, because you're not going to beat him if the Republican Party votes for him.
For what it's worth, and it's worth less than what your insights are because you've worked in the political game forever, Nikki Haley is impressive. And look, every single pollstar, and we're reiterating this from the past few weeks, says she would flog Joe Biden in sporting parlance if she was up against him.
Anyone but Trump would flog, I agree. If the Republicans were purely clinical, non-ideological, pragmatic, they would elect her as their representative. I don't think she's perfect, Tim. I think there are some flaws to Nikki Haley, but she's the best on offering, and she would beat Joe Biden, which says something about Joe Biden and the state of the Democrat Party.
Well, there's no one there, is there? Well, it doesn't seem to be anyone there behind him.
He's certainly feeble and he's certainly cognitively challenged, and the Americans know that. But when you look at all the polling, he outpolls Trump on everything, integrity, international relations. But they mark him down drastically on the economy and mark Trump up. And in the end, the economy is winning as the political determinant.
Let's come home back for a second before we wrap it up. Anthony Albanese, Peter Dutton. Of course, Peter Dutton probably had his nose in front at the back end of last year. He won't want to be complacent now, though. You can't sort of look back to October, November when you get to January, because it's the start of a brand new year. They need to hit the ground running when they get back.
But Peter Dutton's not a complacent person. He'd never be complacent. The biggest threat to Anthony Albanese, in my view, Tim, is it's too late. Yes, they will try to address cost of living. He's got no answers at the moment. He basically needed at the start of this year to reset the narrative, do what Morrison did in 2022, halve the fuel excise. I think there's evidence now that people have made up their mind about Anthony Albanese, more out of sadness and anger because they think he's a good bloke. But can he come back in 2024? To me, that's the biggest challenge for the government. If he's got no answers till the budget in May 2024, I think the ship will have sailed.
OK, we'll watch with interest. We'll do it again next week.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Peter.